Hi, I'm Chitar Button with the Roanoke Tea Party, and this is the first in our series of video presentations about Agenda 21. The first one talks about the big picture and the 3 E's of sustainable development. The basic purpose of this presentation is to show you that there's a lot more to sustainable development, smart growth, and all of the euphemisms used by local, state, and federal officials to talk about sustainable development and saving polar bears in the North Pole and such. And it's really more about socialist control of the economy and about your individual liberties going away to the needs of the collective. Think that sounds crazy? Think that sounds like a conspiracy theory? Well, I think in a few short minutes you'll agree with me that it's not. What is Agenda 21? You hear more and more about this every day. It came about in 1992. It was part of the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, and you can read the whole document online at the UN website, and all this documentation is readily available from all the UN partners, from the federal government. There's no secrets here, just a lot of information to sort through. Feel free to look this up and pause and read this stuff. I think it speaks for itself. Agenda 21, if you read the basis of Agenda 21 from the document, again, it proposes an array of actions which are intended to be implemented by every person on the earth, for all people, and it requires a profound reorientation of all humans. Okay, so that goal in and of itself should tell you really all you need to know about what Agenda 21 is about. How on earth can you bring about that kind of profound reorientation unless it's forced by the government through economic and by controlling your economic activities and your civil liberties? So the very basis of this requires a socialistic approach to government. And you'll see that is the goal that's stated again and again and implemented again and again by both the United Nations and the federal government. Now, the mother of sustainable development is a lady named Gro Harlem Brundtland. Gro was the Prime Minister of Norway, and is an avowed socialist and leader in the worldwide socialist movement. And here's some quotes from Gro about the sustainable development movement. And if you read these, again, pause it, feel free to read them at your leisure. It talks a lot more about opportunities and poverty and social justice than it does about saving penguins. Again, how can you bring about this kind of harmony and this kind of change unless you have the government mandating it? So again, and I don't think Gro Harlem Brundtland would take offense for me saying it's got to be a government-controlled enterprise, because that's the way it was written. Now, there's 3 E's of environmentalism: equity, which means, again, the individual rights have to take a back seat to the collective need. That's straight from ICLEI, which is a United Nations partner and Agenda 21 partner, and some organization we've heard a lot about locally. We'll talk more about them in a later presentation. It talks about the economy, about the fact you need a new economy. What's that new economy look like? Well, it's socialism. It just doesn't play well in the press to call it that. In the United States, so we call it new economy. We call it smart growth. We call it all sorts of different, a green economy. What it boils down to is socialism. And, of course, the environment is part of it, but it's really the excuse to get to the first 2 things, which are really the important thing to the socialist movement. So what exactly is sustainable development? Well, the textbook definition is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. Well, who could have a problem with that? That sounds great. But the question you have to ask proponents of this is, well, what's not sustainable? What isn't sustainable? And they may not have an answer for you, and they usually don't. It's been my experience. But the United Nations does in several different presentations. There's other things that are on here, but here's a good example from the UN Biodiversity Report. Things like livestock and single-family homes. And my favorite, economic systems that fail to set proper values on the environment. That would be capitalism. So remember that first slide. Talked about what the UN's goal was. Well, yeah, you might say to yourself, well, it's the United Nations, who cares what they think? I mean, they don't have any impact on my life. Well, unfortunately, the federal government has taken up the banner of sustainable development and has for 20 years. It started with George Bush, who signed the Rio Declaration, which again, if you remember that first slide, the documentation echoes that. Effective execution of Agenda 21 requires a profound reorientation of all human society. Well, again, I ask the question, how do you reorient the entire human society unless it's controlled by by a socialistic government that controls your economic and civil liberties? It can't be. Now, Senate wisely killed this nonsense, but not to be deterred, President Clinton, a big supporter of sustainable development, formed the Presidential Council on Sustainable Development in 1992, right after he took office, and basically it made the executive branch the stewards of sustainable development. And since 1992, all federal agencies have promoted and tried to promote sustainable development in everything they do. Again, don't think that's a thing. Just read the executive order, read through the HUD website, the EPA website. It's chock full of these efforts to bring about sustainable development. Again, they don't talk about doing away with livestock, but eventually that's where they're going to go. Not to be outdone, President Obama came up with Obama's Rural Council, which talks about strong, sustainable rural communities brought about by activities by the executive branch. Same thing, same goals, same effort, same outcomes. Now, you might think, well, my representatives don't support this. Well, ultimately, the way things are going, it doesn't even matter. For example, cap and trade died in the Congress. However, if you look recently, there's still been over 100 coal-fired energy plants in the United States that have closed down. Why? There's been several oil refineries that have closed down. Why? Because they've been regulated out of existence by the EPA. And Senator John Kerry brags about this. The Obama administration has again reminded Washington that if Congress won't legislate, the EPA will regulate. So, even if your representatives or you elect representatives opposed to this, their goal to bring about sustainable development trumps even the legislative process. And you may think that's silly, but has your congressman been able to stop the EPA from implementing all the oppressive kinds of increasingly oppressive and increasingly nitpicky regulations? Why do you think that is? Why do you think they're looking so deeply into everything that you do? Because again, sustainable development, to bring it about, you have to bring about change in every aspect of human life. And the only way you can do that is to get down into every aspect of everybody's life through regulation. This slide, we don't want to pause and look at this one, maybe zoom in a little bit, but the yellow dots are the federal government and executive branch agencies. The pinkish-orange dots are non-governmental organizations that are partners to bring about sustainable development. Not surprising. Many of those groups are socialistic groups. Center for American Progress, primary supporters of sustainable development, is funded by George Soros. Well-funded socialists, you probably know all about him, as well as Green for All is another big federal government partner to bring about sustainable development, is run by Van Jones, former Green Energy czar and unabashed communist. It's very conclusion. Agenda 21 is more about equity and more about the economy and coming up with a socialistic government that controls everything in your life than it is about saving the environment. The federal government is fully engaged in Agenda 21. It is undeniable. It's, again, do the research yourself, but the executive branch through fiat, through regulation, and through a legislative branch that's unwilling to wield the power that it has basically usurped power to implement cap and trade without legislative support. This having to the trade part. So basically, it's not about saving the polar bears. It's about bringing about a socialist utopia, and I think this brief presentation really shows that, and we'll show more about that in upcoming presentations. Our next one's going to talk about global warming, that 30 about environment is really the excuse to bring about the other two, and we'll show why the particularly global warming is really a hoax. So I know this is disturbing information, but I hope you find it educational and enlightening. And if you do, please share it with your friends who are curious about this. Look for additional videos on this and other sins from the Rona Tea Party. This is Chip Tarbut, and have a great day.